All right, today we're jumping into a really radical idea for a new global currency. I mean, forget gold, forget government promises. What if a currency was backed by the sheer power of quantum computing? Yeah, you heard that right. Let's get into it.
Okay, so it all kicks off with this number, $36.2 trillion. That's the U.S. national debt right now. And, a number that big isn't just a number. It's a massive weight, putting a huge strain on the entire global financial system.
And here's the thing, that whole system, the entire global economy, it basically runs on the US dollar. We're talking nearly 60% of all the money countries hold in reserve. So, when the currency that holds everything up is backed by a government with that kind of soaring debt, well, it kind of makes you start to wonder, right?
You start to wonder if the dollar's long reign, we're talking 8 decades, is maybe, just maybe, coming to an end. And this isn't just some fringe idea. It's a question that economists and governments are asking very seriously. And that question is fueling this almost frantic search for something else, something stable and, neutral.
So the dollar got its top spot way back in 1944. But fast forward to today, and you've got this perfect storm, right? You've got that huge debt we talked about, you have political gridlock, plus you have countries like China actively trying to trade in their own currencies. All of that together, it's starting to create some really serious cracks in that old foundation.
So where does everyone look for an answer? Well, naturally, all eyes are on the digital world. But here's the problem. So far, all the big contenders, everything from Bitcoin to those state-backed digital currencies, they all come with some pretty major flaws. Let's break them down. First up, you've got Bitcoin. Now, yeah, it's decentralized, which is great, but it's just way too unstable to be a global reserve currency. I mean, an annual volatility of 80%? That's not a reliable store of value, that's a roller coaster. It's more of a speculative asset. And that's not even mentioning the elephant in the room. Its proof-of-work model uses an insane amount of electricity. We're talking more than some entire countries.
Okay, so what about stablecoins? They seem like a good fix, right? They solve that whole volatility problem by tying their value to something like the dollar. But, and this is a big but, that's also their biggest weakness. They just end up inheriting all the problems of the very system they're supposed to replace. On top of that, you have a massive trust issue. Just look at the questions around Tether's reserves. You're basically just trusting a single company to actually have the billions they say they have.
And that brings us to the third option, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Think of China's digital yuan. Sure, they're super efficient, but let's be real, they're tools of the state. They are the opposite of politically neutral, and they could potentially open the door to government surveillance on every single transaction. For a global reserve currency that needs universal trust, that's a total non-starter.
So, if the old system is shaky, and all the new digital kids on the block have major issues, where on earth do we look? Well, this is where things get really interesting. The idea we're digging into today asks a wild question. What if? What if the answer isn't in finance at all, but in quantum physics?
Okay, quick refresher for anyone who needs it. Quantum computing isn't just about making faster computers. That's like saying a car is just a faster horse. No, it's a completely new way of processing information. It can solve certain kinds of problems, think super complex logistics or code breaking, in like seconds. Problems that would take the best supercomputers we have today literally thousands of years to crack.
And look, this isn't just some sci-fi fantasy. The economic potential here is absolutely staggering. McKinsey estimates that by 2035, quantum computing will be adding over $1 trillion in value to the global economy every single year. So, here's the key takeaway. This computational power has real, tangible, measurable economic value.
So, what if you could take all that power and turn it into money?
And that, right there, is the core idea behind something called the Quantum Reserve Token, or QRT. It's a decentralized currency, but instead of being backed by faith in a government, its value is directly backed by a productive, scarce, and unbelievably valuable asset, pure quantum computational capacity.
Okay, so the big question is, how would this even work, right? How do you actually turn a solved problem into cold, hard currency? Well, the concept proposes a pretty ingenious system for doing exactly that.
It's based on a new idea called proof of computation, and it basically works in 3 steps. Step 1, a quantum computer somewhere on the network solves a genuinely useful real-world problem. Something like figuring out the absolute most fuel-efficient routes for an entire global shipping fleet. Step 2, the network itself verifies that, yep, this solution actually created real, tangible economic value. And then, step 3, new quantum reserve tokens are minted, and their value represents the value that was just created.
Now this is a huge difference from something like Bitcoin. Think about it. Bitcoin miners burn epic amounts of energy solving what are basically useless math puzzles. But with QRT, the computation isn't waste. It is the product. The currency is literally earned by making the real world more efficient.
And because of that brilliant design, you get something incredible: stability. The theory was tested with simulations based on global economic growth, and the results are just stunning. Look at this. Bitcoin, we know, has 80% volatility. Even the US dollar sits around 8%. The simulated volatility for the QRT, just 3.29%. Now that is the kind of stability you need for a global reserve currency.
I know, it sounds almost perfect, right? A stable, decentralized currency that's actually productive. But, okay, let's bring ourselves back down to earth for a minute. This is still just a concept, and there are some absolutely enormous hurdles to clear before this could ever become a reality.
The concept really boils down to three major challenges. First, the tech. Is it even ready for something like this? Second, the economics. Can it ever get big enough to matter? And third, geopolitics. Would the world's most powerful countries ever just let this happen?
So on the tech side, look, we're making incredible progress, but this timeline really puts it in perspective. We are still in the very, very early days. The kind of powerful, stable, error-corrected quantum computers you'd need to run a whole global network, well, we're probably still years, maybe even a decade away from that.
And then you have the sheer mind-boggling scale of the current system. Every single day, over 5.6 trillion US dollars change hands. For any new currency to even begin to compete with that, it would need to build an absolutely unimaginable amount of liquidity and trust from scratch. I mean, that's not a hill to climb, that's an economic Mount Everest.
Which brings us to the final, really fascinating question here. This idea, the quantum reserve token, it offers this incredible vision for a global currency, one that's stable, neutral, and actually productive. But is it a real blueprint for a better financial future? Or is it just a brilliant idea that's shown up to the party a decade or two too early? Honestly, only time, and a few more massive quantum leaps in technology is going to give us that answer.